Inaz and the Two Unmarriageable Lovers. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This story is narrated in 4 books. Book 1. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer who may quote brief passages in a review to be printed in a newspaper, magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on the real love story of 2 unmarriageable lovers. Therefore, all names, characters, places, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. Chapter 77. The Intellectual Debate with the Apostate Girl. The 3 speeches of the so-called infamous and adulterous girl Inaz Ahmed Sola have been felt by all Sudanese students like mighty storms that hit the city of Bombay and have done huge damages to the religion of peace and the aromatic biography of the alleged prophet of God Muhammad. The secular Sudanese students have given each speech a different name from what Inaz titled it. They named them the storm, the hurricane, and the tsunami of the Sudanese apostate girl. The female speaker of those 3 speeches felt like she has opened the Pandora box and unleashed all kinds of evil spirits. As for the Sudanese Muslim students, the speeches smelt like someone has opened the offensive, nasty-smelling sewer or a filthy Indian public washroom and let out its stench to fill the entire cosmopolitan city of Bombay. The bad odor of the stench spread beyond the city and in a short time reached with the speed of light to many other cities of India. Those Muslim students have never heard before most of those stories and historical accounts about their religion. They have never expected one day a mortal human being could dare to say those disgusting and repulsive stories about their beloved Prophet Muhammad, whom they call the Master of Creation, the one who was sent by Allah as a mercy to mankind, and the one who came to the world to complete the moral perfections. The prophet that the despicable Sudanese apostate girl Inaz depicted in her 3 speeches is worse than Adolf Hitler. Even Satan the devil might not do what she had said their infallible prophet had done. Likewise, her last speech portrayed their religion of peace as a religion of terror and terrorists. Her first speech showed their Islamic religion as the most misogynistic and abusive religion to women in the entire world. If Islam is like that, they said to one another, then who among them wants to believe in it or follow it any longer? Either her unacceptable, controversial 3 speeches must be refuted word by word or Islam may collapse. That is the urgent demand of each and every one of them. They all want the blasphemous apostate girl Inaz should be debated by a highly qualified Muslim scholar. The debate should be done in a huge auditorium and attended by all Sudanese Muslim students at the University of Bombay. It should be recorded and distributed all over the world. It must be treated the same as the debate between the Muslim apologist Ahmed Deedat and the Christian evangelist Jamie Swaggart. That is the general demand. If the Sudanese apostate refuses to come for the debate, then she must be silenced forever by the lions and lionesses of jihad. She must be killed as soon as possible before she preaches more anti-Islamic speeches and tarnish the religion of peace and spoil the aromatic biography of the Master of Creation, the infallible Prophet Muhammad. They are afraid that if she is not silenced, she will give the enemies of Islam weapons to destroy the only remaining true religion in the world. As a result of her 3 defaming and damaging speeches, there are 3 Sudanese students who became apostates and openly renounced Islam. 2 of them had converted to Christianity. They even went to a church and got baptized as Christians. After their baptism, they changed their names from Abdurrahman and Abdullah to Thomas and Peter, respectively. The 3rd one began to go with his Christian Indian girlfriend to her Catholic church and worship the false religion of the cross of the devil. Consequently, there is a violent reaction erupted between the Sudanese Muslim terrorists and the Sudanese student secularists. 2 secularists had been attacked and they got seriously wounded. One of them, his serious injuries are not life-threatening, but they have made him handicapped for life. Also, a secular Sudanese girl was caught distributing those offensive speeches and badly battered by 3 lionesses of jihad. The girl was rescued by the bystanders and rushed to the hospital. The Muslim brothers and sisters began to distribute religious tracts in which they called the speeches of the infamous apostate Sudanese girl Inaz a ploy concocted by the enemies of Islam in order to destroy the only true religion in the world. They believe the imperialist country of the USA, which they call the United Snakes of America, and the Zionist Jewish country of Israel are both behind this new wicked conspiracy against Islam and its founder. Therefore, their efforts hardly made any change to the situation. Some of them sent copies of those 3 anti-Islamic speeches to some prominent Muslim scholars and imams in Sudan and Egypt and requested them to respond through writing or recorded speeches and refute those false allegations against Islam and the Prophet Muhammad. One of the scholars said he might need more than a couple of years to deal with such a huge number of Islamic criticisms. He then advised them to stay away from that dangerous apostate girl who sold herself to Satan. He said such a satanic girl can deceive the biggest Muslim scholar through her deceptive words and cause him to forsake Islam and become an apostate. In the meantime, the most hated Sudanese girl Inaz Ahmed Sulla has received another letter through the address of Mr. Vijay Alexander. This new letter is written in the Arabic language. It did not mention who wrote it or who sent it. It requested her to come for a debate with a Muslim scholar. The name of the scholar and his nationality are not mentioned. The topic of the debate is an intellectual response to her 3 controversial speeches on Islam. The date, time, and place of the debate are stated in the letter. Inaz knew and understood that she would rather prefer to go and debate Satan and his demons than going and exposing herself and put her life in danger with those Sudanese Muslim terrorist students. Her husband Joseph backed her decision and advised her never to talk again about Islam in any public or private places. Therefore, the apostate girl tore their letter and burned it. In the midst of that turmoil, the pregnant wife Inaz delivered her firstborn. She gave birth to a baby girl. The intimate lovers have given their newborn baby the name of Grace. Inaz chose the name because she believes that through the grace of Jesus she got saved from the bondage of the misogynistic teachings of Muhammad and the darkness of Islam and brought to the glorious light and unfailing love of Christ. Shortly after God had given them that angel-like female baby Grace, Joseph and Inaz attended the final hearing of the trial of the proud Sudanese lawyer, Mr. Ahmed Sulla, who tried to slaughter them. Of course, the terrorist father has been found guilty of all the charges that are written against him. His Indian Muslim liar, the lawyer has failed to clear him from a single charge. Accordingly, the evil man has been sentenced to 10 years imprisonment under hard labor without a chance of parole, and he must be deported to Sudan after serving his term in a maximum security Indian prison. The imprisonment of that tyrant father who brutalized and controlled her life and treated her as a female slave rather than a daughter is a great relief for Inaz. She has neither felt sorry for him nor shed a single tear when his verdict is read. She wishes she will never see him again in this life and the hereafter. On the scheduled day of the debate, a huge gathering of Sudanese students crowded a big auditorium. The number of the students who are standing is equal to the number of those who came earlier and found seats. Also, the number of outsider students who came from Pune city is bigger than the number of Sudanese students at the University of Bombay. All of them want to witness the refutation and humiliation of the infamous apostate Sudanese girl who dared to open her filthy mouth and insulted the master of creation who had been sent as mercy to mankind. They want to condemn the whore of Babel who called their beautiful and peaceful Islam the religion of terror and terrorists. They also want to see the great Sudanese Muslim scholar inserting a stone in the throat of the detestable Sudanese girl who committed such abominable deeds and silencing her forever. Many of them are planning to throw their shoes and spoiled tomatoes and eggs on her demonic face. By the way, the so-called great Sudanese Muslim scholar who is supposed to debate and refute the apostate girl is a mere student studying political science at the University of Bombay. And as such, he does not know about Islam except how to pray, when to pray, and a few rudimentary bits of knowledge of that Arabic religion. His little knowledge of Islam cannot enable him to refute a single story of what the female speaker Inaz had said about women in Islam and the life of the alleged prophet of God and the atrocities of that bloody religion. Despite that, he has been declared as a great hero of Islam when it has been announced from the platform that the despicable apostate girl Inaz has withdrawn herself from the intellectual debate without giving any reasonable excuse. Accordingly, the infamous Sudanese apostate girl has been collectively declared by all of them as an incompetent and unqualified female candidate for the intellectual debate. As a woman, she is considered deficient in intellect and religion. After that declaration, the so-called great Sudanese male scholar quoted out of context some words from her 3 long speeches and claimed that the dishonest apostate girl had referred to some weak hadiths and Israelite stories of the master of creation and without shame attributed them to the aromatic biography of the infallible prophet Muhammad. By Israelite, Muslim scholars mean the body of narratives believed to be created by some Jews shortly after the death of Muhammad and somehow incorporated in his biography. This claim begs the question, if Muslim scholars knew about those Jewish false stories about their prophet Muhammad, then why do not they remove them from his biography and only keep the true stories? Some modern Muslim scholars, like the Egyptian liberal thinker Sayyid Mahmud al-Kimni, made that suggestion, but his proposal was strongly rejected by all Muslim scholars of the prestigious Al-Azhar al-Sharif University. They collectively said those stories have been found in the authentic and reliable mothers of the Islamic books such as the Quranic commentaries by Al-Tabari, Ibn Kathir, and Al-Qurtubi, the Hadiths collections by Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Sunan Abu Dawud, Sunan al-Tirmizi, Sunan Ibn Majah, Muwatta Malik, Mishkat al-Masabi, and Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and the biography of Muhammad by Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Hisham, al-Waqidi, Ibn Sa'd, al-Bayhaqi, al-Nazaburi, al-Tabari, and many more. Nevertheless, this so-called intellectual debate ended in chaos and bloodshed. The alleged great Muslim scholar loudly spoke out his refutation for some time and then began to stir up his audience by shouting some Islamic slogans such as Takbir and Tahleel. He shouted those words 100 times, and each time the angry crowd responded by screaming Allah Akbar. This emotional stimulation went on and on until the crowd turned into a religious frenzy which culminated in violent mental excitement. The religious mania turned those terrorist students into ecstatic dervishes who are unceasingly chanting and shouting their religious jargon. Their meaningless gibberish shouts, nonsense abracadabra of Takbir, Tahleel, and Allah Akbar eventually turned them into uncontrollable, dangerous rioters. They became like savages who were suddenly possessed by demons of rage and revenge. Not finding the real culprit, the apostate girl Inaz, to avenge the blood of their prophet on her, they carried out their vengeance, retaliation, and payback on the secular Sudanese students who gave her a platform to spew out her hatred of Islam and on the greatest prophet of mankind. All Muslims made to believe that their prophet Muhammad is ranked number 1 among the most influential 100 persons in human history. This false belief is based on a book written by Michael Hart. In 1978, when Michael Hart's controversial book, The 100A Ranking of the Most Influential Persons in History, was first published, critics objected that Hart had the nerve not only to select who he thought were the most influential people in history, but also to rank them according to their importance. A couple of Indian police constables who are guarding the huge auditorium with their big sticks have fled in terror out of the building as soon as the vicious attacks began. 6 Sudanese secularists have been attacked, beaten, and trampled under the feet of a herd of wild elephants. 4 of those secularists died through a stampede. 2 Sudanese girls who are neither secularist nor religious have been assaulted, their saris snatched out of their bodies, and likewise, their dresses were torn out of their flesh, and they are left half-naked in their underwear and bras. Luckily, they have not been raped. But their naked and exposed bodies have been violently violated and their bare boobs and buttocks fondled by many hands. Their loud shouts have saved their lives and protected their virtues. The religious violence brought under control after more than 50 fully armed Bombay cops arrived and dispersed the satanic ritual through tear gases. Some of those fanatic Muslim barbarians tore off their shirts, exposed their chests, and challenged the police to shoot and kill them. They wanted to die as martyrs for the sake of their beautiful religion and beloved prophet and go to paradise to enjoy the eternal 72 virgins. Luckily, the police of Bombay ignored their challenge and hence refrained from using live bullets. Therefore, the intellectual pseudo-debate has ended in a deadly disaster. Chapter 78. The extradition of Anas to Sudan. The human causalities which resulted due to that satanic rituals are beyond measure. Many foreign students got injured, some killed, many arrested, and a few went missing. Such a deadly religious riot led the Bombay Police Authority to carry out thorough inquiries into this serious matter. The Bombay Criminal Investigation Department took the matter seriously and tried to ascertain the driving force behind such a deadly religious riot among the Sudanese foreign students. What led them to attack their fellow citizens and killed some and seriously injured many? Consequently, the Bombay CID police, through their third-degree harsh interrogation methods, were able to know the reason behind the huge gathering of the Sudanese students. The first information that surfaced is that there was a hot religious debate between a great Muslim scholar and an apostate Sudanese girl. The so-called blasphemous girl had produced provocative 3 speeches in which she spoke disrespectfully about the Prophet Muhammad and derided the heavenly religion of Islam. Muslims in India always refer to their Islam as a heavenly religion because they want to distinguish it from other earthly Indian religions such as Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism, and other Asian religions which they believe are man-made and not from God. So, the second step for the cops, they found copies of those provocative and highly offensive recordings. The 3 speeches are in Arabic. Therefore, in the third step, the police of Bombay translated the 3 speeches of Anas into English. After hearing the interpreted versions of those speeches, the Bombay police arrested the Sudanese apostate Muslim girl Anas Ahmed Salah and charged her with a serious hate speech. Unfortunately, when Anas has been arrested, Mr. Vijay Alexander happened to be out of the country. The suspect foreign girl has been severely flogged by big rods, tortured through other cruel means, and forced to admit crimes she has not done. For instance, she has been forced to admit that she had attended the illegal meeting of the intellectual debate and spoken blasphemous and provocative words against Islam, Muslims, and their Prophet Muhammad. Moreover, she has been forced to say that she had distributed and sold many copies of her offensive and provocative 3 speeches on Islam. Lastly, she has been compelled to say some foreigners from Europe had prepared those anti-Islamic speeches and paid her a huge amount of money and made her read and record them. She had been selected to do so because she is an Arab girl and has her feminine voice with a heavy Arabic accent. The aim of those European Christians is to use an apostate girl from Islam to destroy a recognized Indian official religion, which has over 200 million followers in the country. The case of the suspect girl Anas Ahmed Salah became more serious after the police of Bombay questioned some arrested Sudanese students. Some of those interrogated foreign students are the secular Sudanese students who conducted the 3 private meetings and secretly recorded her speeches without her knowledge and consent. All those foreign students who have been interrogated denied their knowledge of the private meetings and their role in recording and distributing the 3 speeches of the apostate girl. So, the police concluded that Anas had lied in her statement and accused innocent Sudanese students. Additionally, the police thought that the problem between Anas and her Sudanese people has to do with her conversion from Islam to Christianity. Despite that, the police of Bombay decided to deport her to her fatherland as soon as possible. They do not want to keep in jail such a troublemaker apostate Muslim girl. They concluded that her existence in India will always stir up religious violence and riots. The Bombay police ignored the fact that Anas is a refugee girl in India and therefore it is the duty of the Indian authorities to protect her life from any religious attack. Also, they showed blind eye to all the 3 crimes that had been plotted and committed against her by 2 Sudanese diplomats in Bombay, 2 Muslim terrorists in New Delhi, and finally the deadly terrorist attack on her and her Ethiopian husband by her own Muslim father, who is already tried and convicted and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. The decision to return the apostate foreign girl Anas to her country is kept top secret and only a few senior police officers knew about it. Oddly, the head of the Bombay Criminal Investigation Department has not been informed about the case of the provocative and blasphemous Sudanese girl. Neither Anas nor her husband is informed about it. However, the Bombay police decided not to bear the cost of her transfer to Sudan. Therefore, they contacted the Sudanese embassy in New Delhi and requested them to provide an emergency traveling document and airfare for her deportation. The Sudanese ambassador appreciated the willingness of the Bombay police to hand over the suspected Sudanese girl to the Democratic Republic of Sudan. He said, "For an exceedingly long time the Sudanese embassy wanted to deport that troublemaker girl, but their efforts were frustrated due to the unjustified interferences of the Indian police authorities and the United Nations office." Shortly after that phone conversation, the Sudanese embassy sent the necessary emergency traveling document and air ticket of Inaz Ahmed Sulla to the Bombay CID office. For the Sudanese Muslim students, the news of the extradition to Sudan of the infamous apostate girl Inaz is considered the greatest victory ever. They believe that it is their Almighty God Allah who captured the blasphemous and apostate Sudanese girl and delivered her head to them on a silver platter. All the Sudanese diplomats had already received copies of her 3 speeches and considered them the highest blasphemies they ever heard or read. Moreover, those diplomats had already been incensed in rage when the Muslim female legal representative of Inaz of the United Nations office had sent to them her cancelled Sudanese passport in which she had written by her hand in big red letters, "I am no longer a Sudanese citizen. I am now a female citizen of the world. I don't want to be a citizen of a criminal state which is ruled by a bunch of thugs and Muslim terrorists." There is no Sudanese student ever before dared to do what the infamous apostate girl Inaz has done. From that day onwards, they began to think of how to kidnap her again and send her to Sudan for her trial and execution. Some of them suggested hiring a professional Muslim assassin from New Delhi and pay him whatever money he may ask for and send him to Bombay to kill her. But how to do that without being implicated? That is their big concern. They know because of that accursed apostate Sudanese girl they have already 2 pending legal issues against them in the criminal courts in Bombay and New Delhi. While they were trying to plan such an evil plot against the despicable infidel girl, the police of Bombay contacted them and delivered her in their hands. They thanked their God Allah 1,000,000 times and immediately hastened the preparation of the emergency document and her air ticket. This time, they concluded there is no power or authority in India that can stop her extradition to the kingdom of Tartarus, where one of the ghost houses will be her final destination and her grave. Shortly after that, the Bombay police contacted the Sudanese embassy again and requested them to send another emergency traveling document and also an air ticket for the daughter of the detained girl Inaz, who is called Grace Abraha. They told them, "The woman in question is having a 6-month-old female infant with her inside the Bombay women's jail." The heartless Sudanese diplomats advised the police to hand the female baby to her Ethiopian biological father, Joseph Abraha, and extradite the criminal mother to Sudan. They considered her Christian marriage with the infidel Joseph is invalid, and therefore her baby girl is a bastard child who was born outside the sanctity of the Islamic halal marriage bond. Furthermore, they said, the Sudanese law will not permit the woman who is married to a foreigner to give their child her citizenship. The Bombay police followed the advice of the Sudanese embassy and torn apart the female baby from her mother. They then handed the baby daughter to her Ethiopian father and shipped her mother over to Sudan on the same night. Until her plane took off from the Bombay International Airport, her Christian husband Joseph Abraha has not been informed about his Sudanese wife's secret extradition to her fatherland. Chapter 79. Who is behind the extradition of the Muslim apostate girl to Sudan? The flight of the extradited Sudanese girl to her Muslim country from Bombay City to Doha City took 3 hours and 10 minutes, operated by Qatar Airways plane. She has been separated from her loving Ethiopian husband and beloved baby daughter by a distance of 1,430 miles or 2,302 kilometers. Through another direct flight from the Doha International Airport to the Khartoum International Airport, after 5 hours and 10 minutes. The most wanted by the Sudanese police apostate girl Inaz Ahmed Sulla will be back in the kingdom of darkness where she was born to a Muslim family, and she was raised up by a proud tyrant father and arrogant cruel mother. She will be received by the big man himself, the former Grand Emir of the Muslim Brotherhood in the University of Pune. He is now the head of the police authority in Khartoum. The Sudanese ambassador in India had already phoned the grand terrorist and conveyed to him this so-called good news. He told him, the filthy apostate and blasphemous Sudanese girl, Inaz Ahmed Silla, is on her way to Sudan. Her flight had already left the Bombay International Airport and landed at the Qatar International Airport. Then he gave him the number of her flight, the time of its arrival at the Khartoum International Airport, and the name of the airways carrier which was transferring her. All this time, the grand terrorist had been kept updated on the developments of the abominable deeds of the despicable apostate girl Inaz Ahmed Silla in India. The Sudanese embassy had already sent to him copies of her 3 abominable blasphemous speeches. While he was hearing those 3 recordings, the grand terrorist was weeping and shaking in rage. He could not believe his ears that a mortal human being could dare to say something so outrageous like that about the master of creation, the Prophet Muhammad, for whom Allah had created everything. He believes even the greatest tyrant in human history, Adolf Hitler, could not be so maliciously depicted by those Jews who hated him more than the devil. Therefore, the grand terrorist swore by his exalted God Allah and his beloved Prophet Muhammad that he will murder Inaz by flaying her skin from her body while she is alive. For those who are not in the know, flaying is also called skinning alive of human skin from the body. It is a method of slow and painful execution in which skin is removed from the body. Generally, an attempt is made to keep the flayed portion of the skin intact, just like that of a goat or a sheep, which will be made in a prayer mat. It is the most painful form of execution through which the human being is kept alive and tortured for a long time before his death. It is more cruel and painful than crucifixion. The typical causes of death due to flaying are shock, critical loss of blood or other body fluids, hypothermia, and that the actual death is estimated to occur from a few hours up to a few days after the flaying. This cruel method of killing an enemy was invented by the ancient Assyrian soldiers. It was their method of slow and painful killing of their war prisoners. The grand terrorist remembered how his prophet had ordered his companions to cruelly murder those who dared to criticize him. He recollected with fondness 2 of those critics who were brutally murdered for daring to speak blasphemies against the master of creation, namely Asma bint Marwan and Kurfa. Asma bint Marwan composed verses in which she criticized the so-called messenger of Allah for killing his own people. The alleged prophet of God sent to her one of her relatives, Umar ibn Adi, to go and kill her. Umar came to her in the night and entered her house. Her children were sleeping around her. There was one whom she was suckling. He searched for her with his hand because he was blind and separated the child from her. He then thrust his sword into her chest till it pierced up to her back. After committing that hideous homicide, the evil murderer offered the morning prayer with the alleged prophet at the city of Medina. The apostle of Allah said to him, "Have you slain the daughter of Marwan?" He said, "Yes. Is there something more for me to do?" Muhammad said, "No 2 goats would but for her or weep together about her." This was the word that was first heard from the apostle of Allah. The apostle of Allah called him Umar al-Basir, or Umar who has eyes to see. Ibn Sa'd's Kitab al-Tabaqat al-Kubara, Volume 2, pages 30 to 31. Kurfa was an Arab chieftain and leader of the biggest Arab tribe. She was considered the wisest woman in Arabia. Out of jealousy, the alleged prophet of God had decided to assassinate her. Muhammad sent his adopted son, Zayd, and ordered him to capture Kurfa and kill her. According to the prophet's biographers, she was a very old woman, wife of Malik. Her daughter, and another, were also taken as war captives. Zayd ordered Kays to kill Kurfa, and he killed her cruelly by putting a rope between her legs and tied it to 2 camels and driving them until they divided her body into 2 halves. Sirah ibn Ishaq, quoted by Ibn Hisham, page 980. Nevertheless, the grand terrorist preferred to use the most painful method of flaying because, in his views, the Sudanese apostate girl Inaz Ahmed Silla's blasphemies had surpassed all criticisms that the enemies of Islam had spoken against the master of creation. It is hard to describe in human language the mental condition of the extradited Sudanese apostate girl Inaz as soon as 4 Indian female police officers brought her handcuffed to the Bombay International Airport. Until she reached the Bombay airport, she had not been told she is going to be extradited to Sudan. They kept her and kept her husband in the dark. For that reason, neither Joseph nor Inaz was troubled by the arrest. Both of them thought it was a misunderstanding, and sooner or later, Inaz is going to walk out of the prison a free girl. Also, because of that, the unjustly detained apostate Sudanese girl prevented her Ethiopian husband from contacting Mr. Vijay Alexander and his wife Mrs. Mary Alexander and informing them about her arrest. The Alexander couple happened to be away on a short trip to Singapore. They traveled to that beautiful island to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of their marriage. They took with them the best girlfriend of the apostate girl, Teresa. For that reason, Inaz thought they should not disturb the happy time of the Alexanders. Joseph understood his wife's concern and did not phone Mr. Vijay Alexander. He knew in a few days the good man would be back in India and contact his friend, the head of the Bombay CID, and the latter would definitely right the wrong that had been done to his unjustly detained innocent Sudanese wife. It seemed everything worked together against the most hated Sudanese apostate girl Inaz and hastened her inevitable demise. Just before her unexpected arrest, the kind Hindu man who is the head of the Bombay Criminal Investigation Department who rescued her before became seriously sick and hospitalized in the Breach Candy Hospital. So, he was under treatment and therefore was not informed about the arrest of the Sudanese apostate girl. The last coincidence which put the final nail in her coffin, the second man in the Bombay CID who became in charge of the department is a Muslim. At first, he did not take the arrest of the foreign female student Inaz Ahmed Sulla seriously until he read the translated versions of her 3 controversial speeches. He then understood why they were behind the religious riot at the big auditorium at Bombay downtown and led to many human casualties of the foreign students. He said to himself, those provocative and blasphemous speeches may raise the Prophet Muhammad from among the dead and declare a holy jihad if they are read at his tomb in Medina City at the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Therefore, he determined not to let such a wicked apostate young Muslim woman go unpunished for her evil deeds against the religion of peace and the master of creation, Habibullah, the Prophet Muhammad, may the prayers and peace of Allah be upon him. He then went through her past criminal records in India and found the fingerprints of the head of the CID all over her police criminal records. The head of the CID is a Hindu man, and that explained why he was always involved in the defense of the Muslim apostate girl Inaz Ahmed Sulla. No doubt he is a hater of Islam, and for that reason, he protected such an apostate Muslim girl who always tries to defame Islam and its founder. The second man in charge is a dangerous Muslim man who could order some Muslim police interrogators to torture the apostate Muslim girl Inaz to death, and later on, he can plead to be innocent of her blood. But this method of getting rid of the blasphemous Sudanese girl could fool anybody except the head of the CID, who was at that time lying sick in a hospital. He could easily see through it when he would find out that all the policemen involved in her harsh interrogation and death are Muslims. So, he decided to make Inaz get killed by her own Muslim Sudanese people who hate her more than they hate Satan. As a Muslim, he knows the punishment of apostasy in Islam is execution. The first step he took in carrying out his evil scheme, through police torture, he made the apostate foreign girl admit her involvement in the unlawful and provocative debate, which resulted in the death and injury of many foreign students. He also made her confess that she was paid a huge amount of money and promised visas to a Western country for her and her husband and their daughter by some European missionaries. Those foreign missionaries had created highly offensive and provocative religious materials against Islam and the Prophet Muhammad and made her read them and produce those 3 controversial recordings. As a man of high position in the Bombay Criminal Investigation Department, the wicked Muslim man knew and understood that India has a zero-tolerance policy for everything that may lead to religious riots and violence. In accordance, he felt justified to nib such a religious problem in the bud. If he is questioned later by his police seniors, he can say, "I did what I did because I wanted to put an end to a religious issue before it develops into a larger religious problem and cause the death of hundreds of innocent people." He can also say, "I had decided to deport such a troublemaker foreign student girl to her country before she could do something more serious than what she had already done." Because of her offensive recordings and provocative debate, Many drops of blood of innocent foreign students were spilled on Indian soil. Finally, he can also say he had contacted her Sudanese embassy and informed them what one of their female citizens had done in Bombay and what troubles, disasters, human casualties, and dire consequences had resulted due to her illegal actions. He found the Sudanese embassy agreeing with his decision to deport such a controversial speaker girl, and they cooperated in her transfer. They provided her emergency traveling document and supplied her air ticket. They promised him that she will be treated fairly by the Sudanese police authority upon her arrival in Khartoum. They said she will not go to jail, but most probably her name will be placed on the blacklist of the non-flying persons and hence not be allowed to travel abroad for some time.